it was,
Scary.
yeah. I mean, I don't have diabetes, but Alan does.
Yeah.
So, and, I wanted to tell you, I'm signing up, libraries are gonna, across Ohio, are going to be giving the patrons, rapid tests.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, passing them out.
Okay,
So.
that's good.
Yeah. So
What I looked to happen vaccine wise is they'll do it in pharmacies, they'll do it veterinary clinics, wherever. I signed up. They want to know,
awesome.
they want to know if our clinic would give it. Me, I said, yeah, we'll give it.
Yeah.
If we get it first.
Okay. Right.
So I can't see me, so it's not a split screen then. Okay.
I can't see you're on the photo thing right now. I don't know.
How do we? All right, I want to go back to slideshow. Whoa. Cancel. You don't want that.
You're actually sharing right now on Zoom. You can do stop share.
So I am on Zoom now.
Mhm.
I just can't see myself talk. How do I know if anybody's on there? Hit one of these buttons.
Yeah,
There we
now
go.
you can see.
2
Not
participants.
want to even do start video, so it'll see you.
Oh, there we
There you
go.
are.
Okay, I'm with it.
And make sure
Dr.
it's-
Barker's on. What's that?
I wanted to make sure it was recording. I did set it up to
So
record.
mute my audio.
No, you don't want to
No,
mute.
you don't want
yours.
to do that.
No, I gotcha. I
And
gotcha.
it's, I think it's, I've set it up to record as soon as it's.
Okay. All right. We're good. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes. Otherwise, it's going to be just me and Dr. Barker.
Oh. I don't need more talking on it. It's not.
Yeah, give them some time.
I'm going to give him time. I'm not getting excited yet. Okay. Security stop
I'm gonna
video.
pop in on it from my
Okay.
computer here, just so I can see.
How it's working. That's a good plan. Ashley Steele. Okay.
Family affair.
Gary, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. Thank you. How's retirement?
Well, I'm getting used to it.
I bet you are.
Taking a while though.
Yeah, I bet it is. You know, you get up and go to work and it's like party, you know? So I bet you I can't wait to find out exactly how hard it is to get used to it though. I'll be honest with you. Another 10 years, 68. I think that's enough years.
It'll fly by.
I know it. I know it. Where is the volume on this thing? F8.
I actually can hear you, Scott, fine.
Well, I can barely hear you guys. That's what I'm wondering,
Okay,
where the speaker volume is on this.
okay.
I sent him an email.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you find the volume?
No,
I didn't find it either.
I don't want to shut down the Zoom though, so.
Yeah. Usually there's a button right here, but there's only a mute button.
The volume for.
the
on Zoom
computer.
to hear others ask questions or something. Would it be on just the computer? Yeah,
That's all right. I can hear them good enough.
okay.
Well, we'll give them a couple more minutes
Mhm.
since it's 6 o'clock. Maybe we'll give them a couple more. Otherwise, we got a very intimate
We've
presentation here. tonight.
Here comes Bob Smith. Yeah.
Okay. Bob is connecting. Ashley's got her thumb up.
Mhm. Awesome. Looks good.
Okay, there's Bob.
Hey,
Okay.
Scott.
Okay. There we go. We're gonna give them just a couple more minutes.
All right. I'm gonna get my AirPods hooked up here.
I'm all right.
Okay.
I mean, I can hear him. I just gotta stop yapping. Blowing up to you. One more minute. I'm gonna start. So you guys that have seen me talk before know I'm very interactive. So if you want to say something, just start yapping away. Or if you have a question, somehow if you type it, I should be able to see it since I'm screen sharing and I'm the person in charge. So we're getting there. The advantage of Zoom is you can tape it. The disadvantage is you can tape it so they can watch it anyway.
That's right.
So. All right, Sandy, it's 5 after. We're gonna go ahead and start. So the black businesses of Harrison County, and I gotta be honest with you, this is not an easy subject to research because it's in the local papers, in the guidebooks, etc., business guidebooks. It's just really like black people didn't even exist. So you've got to kind of go to alternate sources. A lot of this kind of stuff is oral history. Some of this stuff I've been accumulating over the years. So when we're looking at these guys, I'm not sure if you can read that. I can't read it very well on mine, but it says, how do you find a black business? Well, in 1921, there was a guide to the citizens of Caddis and business guide put out. And so if you look at the top one, that's the white section. And at the beginning of the white section, it says, for convenience, the colored citizens are listed separately. Well, I'm not sure why that's convenient, but it was in 1921. And so do you notice any differences there? Well, the difference is there's no advertisements in the black section.
Right.
None at all. So it's interesting to me that why would that be? And we would assume it's because that's the way race relations were at the time. I would, was this the editor of this publication made it that way? Is it that nobody wanted to advertise? Because if you look at Brooks and Sons, the most up-to-date barbershop in Harrison County, all electric equipment. That is a black business. That is one of 2 ads I was able to find in any newspapers or anywhere else that is a black business. But it's in the white section.
They didn't cater to the black population, did they?
Well, we're going to cover that because
right.
barbers is one of the accepted occupations where for whites and blacks to interact was barbers. Okay. So, but so you could see just finding these business. Now, this book is definitely worth looking at because it gives their occupation. Can you guys read those scans on yours, or are they not
No,
really?
it's too small.
Okay.
Yeah, too small, sorry.
All right. So let me go to the next slide. Well, in order to have a business, you have to have financing. And I was kind of hoping Ken would sign on because this book was put out by a fellow, and what he did was, and this is 1926, P.H. Bruce. He didn't stick around very long. But what I could tell you for an absolute fact is if you were black, your credit scores were invariably lower than white people. So if you did an average credit score with S meaning ask for cash. So Dwight Mason, first of all, not only does he have 4 people to want cash, 2 people say slow payer, one person says fair payer, one says prompt, but they marked him as Kellard.
Oh,
Now, those Masons are all black. So I think Noble is Ken's grandfather or great-grandfather. That's probably his great-grandfather, I think. But it says here he's a fair payer. Now, if you look at Clyde Masters I'm reasonably certain Clyde's black. He's got 12 slow pairs. But if you come down into the Lucases, now these Lucases were businessmen. The Fred and Joe owned a barbershop. So you can see that they misspelled Kellard. So, that's kind of interesting. But you can see the scores in general are fairly low. And so these guys couldn't get credit even if they wanted to start a business. And there were ways around that. And this is one of them. So this is actually our first black businessman. This is Three Bend Hill. You see that S in the middle of your thing? That's Three Bend Hill. You can see it says C. Jackson, 80 acres. Well, Cyrus Jackson was born in 1800 in Loudoun County, Virginia, and he became a blacksmith and he was a slave. And so he had a relatively liberal owner who allowed him in his free time to work and keep his own money. So had he purchased himself, it would have been a relatively quick thing. However, he ended up getting married and having 9 children. So it took him from his teenage years when he became a blacksmith until 1846, about 30 years, to accumulate enough money to buy the freedom of his entire family. He moved to Short Creek Township. Now in Short Creek Township, because there was a big Quaker population, and the Quakers had moved there in the 18 teens and 1820s, and most of these were Southern Quakers who gave up their slaves and moved out of slave country. So consequently, there were a lot of black people in Short Creek Township at that time. So by 6 years after he got here, he purchased 30 acres. I can't see what it says under there, but I think it says for $1,000.
yeah.
And before his death in 1876, he had purchased 239 acres. How did he make his money? Well, blacksmith and farming, but he made his real money because he loaned money to his community. So his first loan was $50, and he eventually bought mortgages. So he could not read or write, but he could calculate interest. So if you look at his will was actually signed with an X.
Wow.
In his will, he left a farm. He appears to have 6 living children when he died. He left a farm to each son, and those sons had to put money in the estate, and the money was given to the sisters. So the son with the biggest farm had to give $900. One son had to give 700, one had to give 600, and then now in 1876, that's a fair amount of money. So what that tells you is these guys were actually pretty successful. So Cyrus Jackson is an example that, if not for chance, we wouldn't even know about him. You're not going to find him in any banking books. But he was very important. And what is interesting about some of these Black-owned farms, the Jackson family lived on Jackson land up until very recently. So we're talking that land has been in the family since 1856.
Wow.
And some of them go back even further than that. So that is a part of Black history that we don't think about. We don't think about these people being landowners before the Civil War, but they were, especially in Short Creek Township. Now, so that would be our earliest Black businessman that we could definitely document. This guy owned a business. Our next one is Moses Fleetwood Walker, which a lot of people know of Moses Walker. They called him Fleet Walker. He was born in Mount Pleasant. He was the first professional Black baseball player. He played for the Toledo Blue Stockings. So he did predate Jackie Robinson. He is in the Baseball Hall of Fame as predating Jackie Robinson. Interestingly enough, there was a Black man 5 years earlier than he. However, he passed as white. So consequently, he played as a white man, not as a Black man. So Fleet Walker had a pretty interesting life. He played after he got ran out of Toledo because he was Black. He ended up playing at Syracuse. And he was walking down the street one day, and 3 white Irishmen who had been drinking, this is what the paper says, or 4, they started harassing him, and one of them threw a brick at him and came at him. And he had a pocket knife, and he ended up stabbing the guy, and the guy died. He was charged with 2nd-degree murder, but he was actually found innocent by an all-white jury, which is really unheard of. He then moved to Steubenville, and he worked for the post office and his brother, but he was convicted for mail robbery in 1895, and he spent a year in jail, mostly in Jefferson County. I didn't have time to research that. His brother was named Weldy. They owned a hotel, and then around 1900, he moved to Caddis and ran the Opera House. So there is a plaque up on the old Opera House. The Opera House is, I guess, would be directly across the street from the courthouse, the main entrance to the courthouse. He had 5 or 6 patents. He invented several inventions for film reel improvements that were actually fairly successful. He'd obviously suffered a fair amount of racism because he was a talented and smart man. So he wrote a book called Our Home Colony, and he argued that the only way the Black man could avoid victimization in America was to emigrate back to Africa. He was in Caddis for about 20 years. And after he died, after his second wife died, he ended up moving to Cleveland, and he and his brother ran the Temple Theater up in Cleveland. He died in 1924. It's a very readable book. It's Fleet Walker's Divided Heart, and you can get a copy right here at the Wiscarrick Public Library. Very readable book. It was, it says 1995. So he's our second documented Black business person. As we go down, oh, this is his invention. I hope it shows up on your screen.
Yeah.
1,228,406 MF Walker, 1920, and it was that center section that you can see. He designed a clip that you could start film in to wind it. Before that time, the clip was not like that, and so it's not exactly like the clips we have today, but it's not far off. So that was one of his inventions. So next, the barbers. So this is, we go back to barbers. So this top, Brooks and Sons, that was in 1921. The Lucas Brothers Shaving Parlor was in the 1949 book for Catas. So if you probably can't read it, so I'll read it for you. The top line is a line from the 1900 census, and a guy named Emmett C. Blanchard was the head of the household. He was born in 1862 in Ohio, and he was a barber. Fred Fields, 36 years old, born in 1864 in Ohio, was also a barber. So in the 1900 census, those ones over there in Caddis, Peter Davis, Joseph Lucas, Fred Lucas, John Smith, and Austin Wallace were all listed as barbers and were listed as Black in the census. So I said earlier, these were the only two Black businesses I could actually find an advertisement for. Okay. I was told, so the Lucas Brothers, this involves the Lucas Brothers. I don't know when Brooks went out of business. I don't think they were listed in 1949, but Lucas was. And Lucas was just up above the library here, but the white patrons would come in and get their hair cut. And after hours and through the back doors, the Black patrons would come. So even though it was a Black owned barber shop, they didn't cut Black people's hair through the front door, nor did they cut it during regular business hours. So that is kind of an interesting aside. But that it just goes to show you, for whatever reason, barbers were Black businessmen, and that they served the white community.
You know,
So,
Scott,
yes.
a lot of these names, you know, we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Right. So
Lucas, Blanchard, Mason.
Right. Blanchard, Lucas, these this Lucas family were barbers up until the do you guys remember them, Gary, when you were younger, the Lucas barber shop?
I don't remember the barber shop, but I do remember the Lucas family lived on East Warren Street.
Yeah.
He was elderly at the time, but
Yeah.
I
And
know
the
that
Brooks-
George
the-
Miser told me he got his hair cut at Lucas Barber when he was young. So that would put it probably in the 40s. Well, I know it was there in 49. I don't know how long it lasted. And
There's a
so
Brooks who was-
obviously you guys don't remember it. Bob, you don't remember it either?
No, but I do remember there was a Brooks that was cutting hair, not with the Brooks barbershop, but he was, I want to say he was, Pam and Charles, Jackie and Linda. I think he was their father. He might have been their grandfather.
Okay.
But he was, and Pam was Kenny's first wife.
Okay. So yes, these names are very familiar. The Jackson name is a familiar Black name. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
many. Well, Lump Jackson is obviously
Yeah.
out of that line.
Yeah.
And so, yes, the lot of these names you will see, if you take somebody like the Christians, they came over in 1829 as freed slaves to live in the freed slave colony. And so when that was out on Tappan Lake, above Tappan Lake. So a lot of these names of these families go way back, and but they're really hard to research.
Yeah.
The reality is, and I say this almost every Black History talk I give, is they didn't make the newspaper unless they did something bad. You know, that's just
Yeah.
all there is to it. I mean, it's kind of, that's just the reality of we're living with. So,
Wow.
I guess Kenny Mason would provide a lot of information on this.
Yeah.
yeah, so Ken did help me out a little bit on some of these, especially coming up.
Okay.
I hoped he would be here tonight, so, but he
Mhm.
isn't. So we'll just plug away without him because he could add a lot of context on these things.
Sure.
Scott, I wanted to mention,
So mining. Now,
Scott-
if you remember our buddy Cyrus Jackson, if you look right in the middle, it says C. Jackson, 83 acres. That farm went to Cyrus's son Samuel and went to his son David Jackson. And it just sold again. It was owned by the Chapansky family. And if you guys know the Merricks, Nick and Hilda Merrick, their farm is just north of that. Where it says 90, that's all Merricks. But anyhow, he had a mine. And I actually took photos of the mine opening is still there. And so is the kind of the gob pile. He would bring this coal out by hand, and he would push it down to the end. He had a little flat spot. He'd push it to the end, and he would throw the gob over the hill. And so the point with him is his taxable value went from $1,700 to $20,000 in 3
Oh.
years. And he probably sold his coal to Robyville, the Roby coal mine, which would have been probably the Summers mine at the time. And so that's an interesting, you know, that 20,000 is a lot of money in 1920. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, when cars were $200. So he was one successful miner. The mine reports list him as the only employs one miner, and that was himself. But he was obviously shrewd enough or savvy enough to sell his coal for a good profit and end up having some value. Now, if you talk to any of the old guys in Hopedale, they talk about the black and white mine, and they call it the black and white mine because it was owned by a black person and a white person. I know by oral history that it was Eli Francisco and Chooch Pellegrin. Now, there was no black and white mine, but that was the local name for it. I think it was the diamond mine, but I did not have time to research that. So they actually owned a small strip coal company between Parlett and Hopedale. And how long it was in existence, I don't know. I just didn't have time to figure it all out. But I thought that was interesting. I've kept that little tidbit for probably 10 years. Somebody told me that 10 years ago, and I thought, oh, I'm going to use that someday. Eli also owned a bar. It was called Eli's Bar, and that's out on 151, just past the railroad tracks going towards Jewett. And I'm 99% certain that's the bar right there. But a lot of the black community in Caddis would drive to Eli's Bar to buy his liquor, because I don't know if they couldn't buy it in town, or they just wanted to make a trip, or they wanted to support another black person. I don't know, but Eli owned that bar for a lot of years. And there are no Franciscos. They all went towards Steubenville. So, but at any rate, so we have two miners for sure. And it's kind of funny when you talk about mines, you know, one of the reasons our black community population started dropping is they could not get work in the mines. By the time the miners were making real money in the 40s and 50s and 60s, And if you talk to these miners, they'll say, "Oh, we had a black guy." Well, yeah, you also
Yeah.
had 3,000 employees. And you had one black
That's
guy.
right.
You know, if you can remember the one black guy, that means you didn't have any black
Yeah.
guys. And so what happened is we started to get an immigration to Cleveland and Youngstown. They worked in the steel mills.
Yep.
And so, and a lot of these guys went on to be, you know, dentists, and I think the Masons were dentists and optometrists and all kind of other things. So anyhow, but the mines were kind of in
Discriminating.
the 1900s and in the 1921, you will see quite a few black occupation miner. But by the time you get to 1949, there aren't very many miners that are black.
Yeah.
So
It didn't
to
open
find
up for, I
opportunities, yeah, Bob.
was gonna say, it didn't open up underground mines probably till the 60s, and the deep mines or the surface mines didn't really have blacks until the 70s.
No, but they all had one, because all those
Yeah.
guys, oh, we had a black guy, well, you had a black
Yeah.
guy. That doesn't
Yeah.
really count, but so anyhow, that's kind of what also happened to the black farmers. Now that's another story, but you know, sold the property, got off the farm, sold the coal, what have you. So, any rate, I could probably do a little more research there. Forest homes, tea houses, and pool halls. So this book is called The Green Book. You may have heard of it. I think they had a
Yeah.
movie.
There's a movie, the Academy
Yeah.
Award winning movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so that book was published from, I forget, maybe 38 to 1965. And it said, in the Green Book, it said, the early one said, this might save your life. You know, and that was probably true in parts of this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know enough about the book to know if you had to pay to advertise in it, but we did have a person from Caddis who was in the book from 1953 to 1962 by the name of Mrs. James Petrus. I have no idea where they lived. I couldn't find a land record for them easily, but she ran what was called a tourist home. And so, you know, this was obviously before interstates and all that. And Caddis was definitely a thoroughfare for people traveling different places. And so that was a known safe spot for Black people to stay overnight. And that's how they used that book. Mrs. Pearl Jackson had a tea house. It was on Ohio Street. George Rudolph had a pool hall. That's all I know. My man Kenny sent me 2 names and he didn't send me any details. And I tried to find some stuff about them, but these are the type of businesses that aren't registered with the state. You know, this probably was a pool hall in a basement somewhere. I'm not sure where either of those are, but they were both on Ohio Street, so they were both very near where we're sitting. I'm sitting anyhow.
Scott?
Yes.
Pearl Christian, I talked to Greta about her, and that was actually her grandmother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. And she said her home is no longer there. It's been torn down now.
Okay.
But it was on Ohio Street, and she remembers, she was giving me some details earlier about her.
Okay.
I think she made pies and sold them, and they were really good pies. I remember going to pick for the fairs and that. I think some groups bought them from her, and she was really, really great cook.
Okay. George Rudolph, anybody know? He worked for the State Highway Department, and he also had a pool hall. So my guess would be there was Gatto's pool hall, but my guess would be blacks weren't allowed in Gatto's pool hall. So those are a couple of the hospitality things, but unfortunately, once again, Black businesses are really, really hard So I read the New York Times obituaries. I read the New York Times every day, but I always read the obituaries just because they're great obituaries. And someday I'm hoping to have an obituary like that. So they wrote an obituary yesterday. I've been thinking about this question, what are we going to do? Because really, I'm out of black businesses. I mean, that's it. But this guy was named Douglas Turner Ward. He says he put the spotlight on black theater, dies at 90. He was born to impoverished farmers who owned their own tailoring business. And that really got me thinking, what is a business? These guys were impoverished farmers that did tailoring for extra money. So if we define a business as a structure or a place or an advertisement, there just weren't any significant number of black businesses. That's all there is to it. However, if we define a business as you make your own choices, you work for yourself, then we can expand this list greatly. So anyone who owned their own tailoring business is a black business. So if you look in the 1920 list, Joseph Jones was a tinner. Tinner repaired metal buckets, metal cups, metal whatever. Charles Gross and Roy Carter were horse trainers. Now the Grosses were horse trainers. They might still train horses. As a matter of fact, I think they do. And so this goes back to 1920. This was a family business. These guys trained standardbreds. Resin Cooper was a teamster, gardener, and cesspool cleaner. So these guys are all black businessmen, but you're not going to find an advertisement that says Resin Cooper, cesspool cleaner. But
The Williams family also were the horse trainers and things, and locally too.
Yep.
Chucky Williams.
Chucky Williams. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. He was, really, and Lou, his brother, they were
Right.
national reputation.
Yeah, Lou was nationally. Yeah, that's right. So modern trash and refuse collection. I certainly remember Clyde Williams and Charlie Davis.
Charlie Davis. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bunny West.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, guys, this is a pretty incomplete list of black businesses because I didn't include all those people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be an interesting project that I don't have time for, but I think it would be an interesting project. But the reality is, and that's what makes these Black history presentations so challenging, is that there just isn't a whole lot written. Now, if you want to know about the guy that stabbed a guy, I could tell you stories all night long about black people. However, that is not really what we want to know. There are some black newspapers, and so I think it was the Cleveland Advocate. I think I can't remember the last part of it, but it had a Short Creek column in it every week. So that shows you how many of those people went to Cleveland were tied back to Harrison County. So-and-so in Short Creek did this, so-and-so in Short Creek did that, and they had some Caddis stuff in there too. So this was a newspaper that would have circulated, but it doesn't have any advertisements or anything like that for businesses. So of the black families that stayed in the county, this is a very relatively incomplete list. But really the most profitable black business at all we didn't even touch. And that's the farmers.
Yeah.
If you look in the bottom left corner, that's our buddy Cyrus Jackson, that's 3 Bend Hill. If you look at Muntz, J.E. Muntz, 134 acres plus an additional, looks like 22 acres. The Muntzes were a black family. And he owned 160, roughly 160 acres in Short Creek Township. And if I could expand that map a little bit, and I really couldn't because it unfortunately lost detail, but that's the 1874, 76, I forget the exact date, atlas of Harrison County. And there are a lot of black farmers. And so Sandy's already hounding me about doing black farmers. I'm not sure when that's gonna happen. So she said there were, did you say there were West farmers out by you, Sandy?
Christians were in Scio.
What's that?
Christians were in Scio.
Christians. Yeah, those Christians would have originally started at the Zion, Little Zion. And when that, brief history is, a guy in Virginia on his death bought 2 farms. One is over in Harris or Jefferson County, and the name just completely slipped out of my mind. And one is in Harrison County, and he settled these families on it. And that worked for a few decades. And after that, obviously, some people work harder than others. And eventually there were lawsuits, and the Christians were winners in those lawsuits. And those farms came from that Bent's will in the 1820s. And so that's where a lot of those, that's up on the hill above Scio, but that's probably where they were located or somewhere near there. But if you look in that 1900 census, there are a lot of farmers. And if you start going down through them, 150, 60 acres is not a small farm. And obviously we can't imagine what that looked like at the time because that was pre-stripping. But there were a lot of black farms in and around Short Creek, many in Caddis Township down towards Fox's Bottom, out Jackson Road there, that road that loops kind of behind the hospital. Those were all black farms there. So the farmers were successful. They were landowners. It was a way to accumulate wealth. And so many of these farms were farmed for not quite 100 years. A lot of them were 1840 to 1855, 1860. And by 1940s, most of them were sold out for coal. But they were their own businessmen, and bottom line is they bought their own property, which means they had to have money to buy the property. So that, unfortunately, guys, is as much as I could get you on.
Very insightful.
Excuse me?
Very insightful. Yeah, this is like history I wasn't aware of, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'm glad you said insightful, because I felt insightful when I thought about a couple of these things. I thought, man, what am I going to do? But it's all, when I started looking at that credit rating book, and anybody that had Kellard by their name had a bad credit rating. And the funny thing is, I would say the average white person might have had 2, 3 merchants. The average black person might have had 15 merchants. So, and invariably they had bad credit scores. Well, you can't get money with bad credit scores. That's just all there is to it. And so you can't build wealth.
Right.
And that's what takes it from generation to generation, is you have to build the wealth so the next generation has something to build upon. But really,
Scott, you referenced earlier around, I think Kenny's got some cousins and uncles that became doctors,
right?
And professional people. There's another family, Lee, that lived, that's where Balls live across the street from where I grew up in Main Street there. That's where Mrs. Lee lived, and she had 3 sons that I think became lawyers and doctors. I think they went to Cleveland as well.
Yeah, okay.
But my point is that the generation of people that were provided upward mobility, they provided upward mobility to move to a city. So
right. And that's because their parents had, they had to get jobs and,
Right, right. Yeah. Why would they say stay if they're going to be treated like that?
the steel mills were integrated. I mean, the steel mills had a lot of black people in them up in Cleveland and Youngstown, not so much in Steubenville. But the steel mills did have, up in Cleveland and Youngstown, there were a lot of blacks working the steel mill. So, but yeah, that in itself, I think Ken and I have talked about doing a Black history on that. Some of these families, you said there were 3 professionals in that family. I
Yeah.
know the Masons had at least 2 doctors, maybe 3. I don't know which
Yeah.
branch of the Masons it was. But like you say, that upward mobility, they're not here.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't move up, they couldn't go upwardly mobile
Right.
because they couldn't get the good jobs in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And that really is what built a lot of wealth in this area for the generation ahead of me, was the coal mine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And the steel mills, Jefferson County, the steel mills especially.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what that's, my family were poor coal miners, and until the steel mills became unionized, and next thing you know, they got a little money. Next thing you
Yeah.
know, I'm a doctor. So there you go. So that's how
That's
it
right.
works,
That's how it works. That's right.
Yep, that's exactly right.
What about
So,
these farms?
Anybody have any
These-
questions?
Yeah, these farm owners.
Yes.
Now, what did they raise sheep at that time, or
Okay,
crops?
so I looked one of them up just for fun, and there was an alternate schedule, Gary, and I can't think of what it was called, but these were back when farms had a little bit of everything. So and it was Cyrus Jackson's son, I think it was Samuel Jackson. He had 3 milk cows, for instance. Okay. And those were obviously provided family milk and butter. But then he had, I don't know, like 18 beef cows, 75 chickens, a little bit of everything, but a lot of crops. I think he planted 5 acres of potatoes.
Wow.
Is what is just off the top of my head. That's my recollection. And so, if we ever do that farmers one, we'll pull some of that data out, and you'll see these were true. That's what they did back in that period in time. They did general farming. Just to give you, from a farming standpoint, in order to have, now there were a lot of sheep in this county, but sheep really do good in limestone. It has something to do with the minerals. It has, so the limestone, there's not a lot of limestone in this area, so you will not see as many sheep down here. Now you go up into Moorfield and all those, pretty much everywhere but here, and there were a lot more sheep than there were right here. And that has to do with, most likely, lack of limestone in the subsoils. It has something to do with the way the minerals and the forages grow. They grow better wool when there's limestone around. That's kind of
I'd heard that theory.
yeah. So
too.
what you'll see is areas that don't have limestone did not have a ton of sheep. So they did not have a ton of sheep. They had a lot of chickens, if I remember correctly. And it said, how, I forget how much product they sold, but in that alternate schedule for the census, they had to report how much product they sold. And off the top of my head, $1,100 pops in. Well, $1,100 in, I think that was 1880. That's a lot of money. That's a fair amount of money. But it's a very true statement that wool built this county. First wool, then coal. But like in this area, that is not quite as true. So if you can see on that map, right below J.E. Muntz's name, it says CB. That's coal bag. So he would have had a drift mine there. Some coal came out of the hillside there, and he would have had a little drift mine. He sold little coal on top of things, you know, or used coal at home or what have you. But that's what CB means. CB is coal
Okay.
bag. The black dots are orchard. So all those black dots, Jacob Moore had an orchard, a fairly large orchard, it looks like.
Wow.
So that's what the black dots are. Those are fruit trees. I don't know if there's anything else I can point out on that. Now, the square spots are actually houses. So the black squares are houses. And most of those roads are actually, not all of them, but most of them are still there. So not all of them, some of them's been stripped out.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that they would have been a general farm, but that back then, that's what you did. You know, even when I started my career, we still had farmers who were milking 30 milk cows and 40 milk cows. You know,
Yeah.
it's a recent development that you got to have 150, 200, 250 to make a living. That's a recent. Sandy, how many did you guys milk? Do you remember?
85 to 90.
Yeah,
Wow,
85 to 90.
you're big players, that for sure.
So that and that would not even you would lose money every day at 85 cows now.
Yeah.
I had a black farmer over in Smithfield. His name will come to me. Anyhow, he milked about 32 jerseys. He sold cheese milk.
Hmm.
He was pretty low maintenance, you know. He'd go out there and milk his cows every day, and so yeah, I mean, I caught the very tail end of those 30, 40 cow herds. And it's only a recent development. What's that, Sandy?
Another successful dairyman that was African American from over by Smithfield. You remember Vince West?
That's who I was trying to think of.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah, great guy.
His herd was relatively small when I did him, so I don't know if he was ever bigger than 30, 40 cows. I couldn't think of his name.
Yeah, good. I love Vince. He was awesome.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I could not think of his name, but yeah, I did some work for him early in the 90s. He sold out or passed away sometime in the late 90s. But at any rate, so yeah, these guys would have sold eggs. They would have sold all kind of whatever, pretty much everything. But like I say, I think the one planted like 5 acres of potatoes. So he obviously sold potatoes. Other crops, Gary, up really until the turn of the 20th century, tobacco was big.
Really?
really?
Oh yeah. We had lots of cigar factories. That's a whole nother talk. But we had cigar factories, several in New Athens and at least one in Piedmont. And tobacco was a big crop in this
Well,
county at
Wheeling-
one time.
Wheeling
I
had
never heard
tobacco factory or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
Wheeling Stogies.
yeah. Mark
No,
Wheeling.
oh no, there were quite a few tobacco factories in this, or cigar factories in this county. But yeah, no, that by the end of the 19th century was pretty much gone. They were no longer growing tobacco in this county. It's just because they grew it, Bob, doesn't mean it did well.
Yeah.
You know,
For consumption
I
only,
mean,
yeah.
it's just because you plant a fruit tree doesn't mean it's going to produce a lot of fruit. And so what happened is these farms were not nearly as profitable as the southern farms because of climate. And as southern farms transitioned out of cotton and into tobacco production moved south.
Yeah.
That's kind of the short, very, very short version of that. But yeah, no, so tobacco would have been a crop for sure. So fruit trees were common. But yeah, that I don't think that talk will be done by next year, but who knows? I'm still pretty busy, but it's one that interests me a lot because it's kind of overlooked. It's kind of overlooked. Nobody thinks about black farmers. Vince was one. That's the only one I can think of that was actively farming when I came here was Vince. I can't think of any others. So
Yeah, and I wanted to let you know that I did post in the chat the link to the digital shoebox digital copy of Our Home Colony.
oh, okay.
So if anyone wanted to read that, it's
Okay.
accessible there.
Thank you.
It's like 36 pages long. It's short.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
actually read it last night. So it's short. It's definitely interesting to read. So, well, that's
Excellent.
50
Excellent.
minutes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other
Thank you,
questions?
Scott. Appreciate it.
Yep,
Scott, one
you-
question. I remember having a conversation with you about my curiosity around why a Catholic church wasn't built in Cadiz until 1948, given the demographics beginning in Hopedale and going east along the river. And I think you had some thoughts around that. So that'd be a talk that I would, whether it's
Well,
a
I can
formal
give you a
talk or
real
a
short
conversa-
synopsis.
Yeah.
Nobody would sell them property.
Wow.
What?
No, when the father who purchased the old Presbyterian church, and trust me, if those old Presbyterians knew there was a Catholic church in their church, they would be rolling in their graves.
Wow.
He did not wear his collar
Oh my gosh.
to purchase
Really?
that property. And that
Yeah.
is, I am assuming that is a true story because I heard that from two different old guys.
Yeah. Well, I
One
remember
of them was
hearing from
Milt Ronchide, and I can't remember the other one. But
One of the-
that is exactly what happened there. They could not find property.
well, even if you go throughout small towns throughout Ohio, which there are hundreds, the Catholic Church is never on the main street.
No.
Um,
No.
so,
And the other thing too is you got to remember these were poor Catholics.
Yeah.
Up until unionization in the 30s, these guys didn't make a ton of money.
yeah.
So I'm going to tell you my Catholic story, Bob, and then we'll finish with this.
All right.
My great grandfather was a Hungarian named Joseph Maranye, and my uncle says he left Hungary so he wouldn't get conscripted. And one day, my grandmother, who was like 97 at the time, I said, Grandma, I want to get this story straight. Your dad came here to avoid being conscripted. And she said, no, that's not true. I said, well, why did he come here? He said, well, his mother died and his father married a Presbyterian. And he got mad and left because he was Catholic. And I thought, now that sounds like my family.
Yeah, that's a straight. Yeah,
That sounds like a true story to me.
Yeah, yep.
And so, yeah,
Wow.
he came over and they were in the Hungarian Orthodox Church down in Bayanek or one of those.
Mhm.
Blaine is where it was. So, yeah, she was actually raised Catholic as one of the Catholic minors. But yeah, none of the Catholic, you're right, none of the Catholic churches are on Main Street for sure
Yeah.
in the small
Yeah.
towns. Now,
Right,
Steubenville, they are.
Yep.
So
Well, thank you for what you do. This is fascinating. It's
good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed
No-
doing it.
Yeah,
Someday
yeah. I'm
if
gonna
I hope to really work hard for another 5 years and then maybe work half time the rest of the 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yep.
Do this stuff because it's really fascinating. If I had the time, you missed it, dude. Ken, I can see you're muted. You missed it. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, I didn't know when it was.
Well, I texted you and said, join me. I'm lonely here.
Right. I was in the yoga class with my phone turned off.
Oh, well,
Oh,
you know, at least
wow.
you're all feeling all yogaed up and namaste all up. All right, so I got a question for you while you're here, buddy.
Yeah.
Do you know where that Prentice business was?
The what?
Petrus, James Petrus that was in the Green Book?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
It was
was it?
down where Bob grew up there on Main, on the right-hand side, where Mr. Petrus lived.
Right,
You
like,
remember where Brooks, you know where Brooks's lived down there?
yeah, yep.
That's exactly
Above that?
where.
What, right there?
Yeah, that's
Wow.
where.
That
Yeah,
road is called RFD2, right?
Yes.
Down towards the Kirklands and,
Yeah. Yeah. He
Yeah.
Petrus owned that whole area there along that side of the property, right off of the corner of North Street going down.
yep,
And
yep.
so he and his wife lived there. And prior to it becoming North Main Street, it was RFD2.
Okay, wow.
Okay. Where was George Rudolph's pool hall?
Pool Hall was on the corner of Roan Avenue.
Yeah, I couldn't find Roan Alley. Where was it? Where is
Okay.
that?
Roan is right off of, if you go across from the library, where the trucks parked there at the gas station.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember that.
It's that right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I have a picture of my grandfather sitting in there. I don't know whether he was a little tipsy or not, but he was passed out.
Hey, Ken,
and
why don't
sleep.
you send that picture to me and I'll stick it in this presentation?
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
do that.
Ken,
Yeah,
when
'cause
do you remember, when were blacks allowed in Tony Gatto's pool hall? Do you remember when that was? There was a time that they weren't, right?
Well, there was a time when they were not allowed in the home restaurant to get a sandwich or sit at the bar. I remember hauling trash with Clyde Williams,
Sure.
and would go to the back door, and I'd sit in the truck, and he would get a sandwich handed out to him through the back door.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And that didn't change until Byron Mason, Everett White, and Larry Brooks, who ultimately ended up, and we got to do a story on those cats.
That'll be next year. Let's do that next year.
Yeah, they're the ones that hijacked the plane to Cuba
Right.
in protest, and they had been marching in the uptown of Cadiz because all three of them came back from Vietnam and were irritated because of the
All right.
home restaurant.
Don't tell
and
too much of that
purposes.
story, Ken.
Oh my gosh,
Hold that thought.
that's a teaser.
We
That's a
need to
teaser.
do that.
Yeah.
That, Sandy, we have next year's
Got
Black
it.
History
That's a teaser.
presentation because
Yeah.
we are the proudly have natives that have hijacked the plane and went to Cuba because they thought it'd be better.
Yep,
My,
and they were in prison there in Cuba for
Yeah.
like 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
oh, geez.
Wow. Oh my
And one of
God.
them just
Bob.
passed, didn't he, Ken?
Byron did. Bob, he
Byron.
lived right down the street on the corner from you. It was James and
Oh.
Jason's brother, older brother.
Older brother. No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they were
Oh my
marching
gosh.
up there. My mom and them told me, said, you better not be up there with those fools.
Fools.
what? So that was in the late 60s, mid 60s.
Late 60s, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was after they got back from Vietnam. They couldn't eat at the home restaurant and they were getting shot at in Vietnam, come home and can't eat in the restaurant.
So in the
Uh,
late 60s, that was still the case, Ken.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
True
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I mean, you probably did the Brooks Barbershop, right?
yeah.
I did. And
Yeah.
I told them that the white people went in the front door and the black people came after hours in the back door.
But the rest of that story is my dad worked on the railroad, and his grandfather was a barber, and Smith was his last name, and he ended up cutting black guys' hair because they refused to go to Brooks's and be relegated to the back door.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, really?
He had a very good business cutting hair on weekends, and I know that personally because I would get a quarter for sweeping the hair up when they were done.
All
So
right,
you-
so where was Lucas's parlor at? It was coming down
barber
the hill
shop?
towards the library, right?
The barber shop is right there where the wine
That's what I
store.
thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ken. Noble, who's Noble?
Noble is my great uncle. He was my grandfather's brother. He worked at the state garage. That he was the senior. Hold on a sec. He
Yeah.
was the senior to all of the. He was the father to the doctors, and that left Caddis, graduated, and went to Case Western, Ohio
Yeah.
State.
Yeah, so Bob was telling me about the Lee family too.
Yeah,
Do you know
Benjamin.
them, Mr.? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, she lived across the street from us, and I delivered a paper, and she gave me a real tutorial about her kids, and
Yeah.
I thought, really, I didn't know black people could become doctors and lawyers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
They weren't
Yeah,
on
Benjamin-
television. They weren't on
Yeah.
television. They weren't in Canada, so how would I know?
Yeah, you would not know, and that's part of the problem as far as
As far as researching them.
researching,
So
and
Ken, what I did, this
also
slide,
having individuals, Scott, that could have been mentors to people.
Yeah.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and
Well,
let me
yeah,
finish up with the Noble deal. Noble Mason, most of those guys were my dad's age. Like Ted was a dentist, and Irvin was a dentist, and Delbert was a doctor. He's a pediatrician. But I knew about them, and they told the stories. And I had a great uncle, Dean Mason, back in the 1920s, that was a physician, that was a doctor in Xenia, around the Xenia area, and then ultimately ended up down in North Carolina. But they were the ones that if I looked to have mentors, or I kind of applied myself to, it was like, if these guys could get out of Caddis then and do something and make something of themselves, I surely can do
You had
something
to.
in my
You knew
life,
you had to.
Right.
not
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
limited.
So Ken,
by
can you
staying in
see this?
Caddis.
Can you see the slide?
Yes.
So that is the credit report from 1926. And so what this guy did, he would go around and he would ask these guys, is this a good player, a fair player, a slow player, or ask for cash? And what you find is, by and large, if you're black, your credit score is lower. Period.
Right. Now,
So
what
But
year?
no-
Charles Mason, for instance,
26.
had 1 fair payer, 3 slow payers, and 2 of them asked for cash.
Yeah, that
Dwight
was either
Mason,
my-
who was Dwight?
Charles was Charles is my grandfather.
So this is
Dwight,
1926.
yes, that's my grandfather, because my father was born 1919, January 19,
Yeah,
1919.
so this is Noble Senior here, not Noble Junior.
That's correct. And that's
Yeah.
that's his brother, Charles.
So
Dwight
who was Dwight? Do you know?
Dwight is also his brother.
Okay.
And
But even if you go down to the next layer, you got Fred and Joe Lucas, who at that time had their own barbershop in the early 20s.
right.
But look, their credit score is terrible, and they own their own business.
Well, Fred was an A5, and then he was a D4 and a VS. Yeah. He had
Yeah,
all.
so, but
Get 'em
what you'll
all.
find is, well, first of all, I thought it was interesting they misspelled Kellard, so I'm not sure what that says about the guy that's accumulating. I thought that was pretty
Well,
funny.
well, that's probably better than what they were referring to us as. at that
Correct.
point, even misspelling.
That is, yeah. Cole Red is probably better than what they actually call these guys. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you look to the black people tend to have more merchants report their names
Yes.
as
they
opposed
did.
to a lot of white people have one person,
Yeah.
or, something like that, where a
Well,
lot of
think
the black
about it,
people
though.
have 8, 10, 12 businessmen reporting their name.
Right. But think about the majority of those black residents probably were in situations where they had to go to them for a handout or go for something to get a loan or to get something,
Well, the whole point of this slide is they couldn't get a loan.
Right. Right.
For them to get a loan, they had to get a loan typically within the community.
How deep do you want to go into this? Because I could tell you something that my mother said to me. She
Yeah, go ahead
said,
and tell us something your mother said. That's why I was hoping you were on board,
Yeah.
buddy.
my mother told me, she said, and I was probably 12, 13 years old. And she said to me, she says, I'm going to tell you something. She said, you know what's free in this world? She said, a black woman and a white man. And I said, what? And I, for probably till I was 29 years old, I never quite understood from a political perspective what she was talking about. And I called her up one day, and I was working downtown Cleveland, West 6th Street in the Rockefeller building.
Yep,
And
yep.
I said, Mom, I know I know what you told me at 13. She said, what are you talking about? And I told her, and she laughed. What she was saying is that my mom could go uptown to any of these people businesses, and she could get anything that she wanted as a black woman. My dad nicks
Could
out,
not.
but
Yeah,
he could
yeah.
he couldn't get a thing, And she even went as far as, when we really started talking about it, she says, what you need to understand is, from slave days, the black woman was integral as far as the business of the white man. And he was cutting his wife out in a lot of situations and sharing more, just the relationship wise, with the black woman, with these black women. So why do you think that the black men have such a hard time dealing with these strong black women?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you talk about life, or you talk about life experiences, I mean, that stuff started coming to me at an early age, at 12, 13 years old, having an understanding of something as critical as that type of distinction between acceptance and non-acceptance, masculinity versus femininity.
Yeah.
And
Well, hey, Bob, I'm
slave
sure
life.
you remember, maybe you remember, I don't know, when were blacks allowed to go on the first floor to theater, Ken? Movie theater.
Oh, okay, that's another story. Noble Mason's wife, Aunt Mabel, she refused. She was as light as any of you guys, and she was from Canada. They actually arranged the marriage with the Proctors and with her family and Uncle Noble for whatever reason, but they did. They arranged the marriage, but she would take her kids, and she refused to go to the balcony.
Really?
In the theater, and she sat down, and no one ever said a thing to her.
Yeah, right.
But the black people that did go to the upstairs in the balcony, they had the best seats when you really.
Well, that's what they all say. Yeah.
But they called it peanut heaven, because they'd sit up there and throw peanuts down on the people that were watching the movie.
Yeah. Noble was a paper route customer of mine, and he and Mrs. Lee were, and those two people would, on a cold day, they would bring me in the home, give me hot chocolate or something.
Oh yeah.
And they would open up about their families, and I was just fascinated about their children and the successes that they had.
Well, Benjamin Lee, Mrs. Lee's son, was an attorney there in Cleveland. As a matter of fact, he lived in the same area as Ted Mason and Beverly Mason, who was the dentist. And Ted blockbusted, and he was in Look magazine. That's another story. He was in Look magazine or Life magazine back in the early 60s, because if you look at, and I've got documents for the terminal, out of the terminal tower when my office was there, Bob, in Cleveland, that the Van Swearingens built the rail line going out to Shaker Heights and out to East Cleveland. And when they set aside the parcels and set up the community of Shaker Heights, specifically said there would be no blacks and no Jews allowed.
Wow.
And so when Ted was there, graduated from Case Western, a doctor, and he had gone to Shaker Savings for a loan, and they refused to give him a loan, saying that he could not live in Shaker Heights. And he sued them, and ultimately, they called it blockbusting at the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he ended up, and he lived right next to Benjamin Lee up there
Wow. No kidding.
in the Shaker Heights area. Yeah.
The NPR station here did a documentary around the laws in Ohio that were just blatantly discriminatory. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
always thought that it was societal. I didn't realize it had become legislated as prominently as it was.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Right.
it was shocking. But now, for instance, Shaker is really noteworthy because it's called out as the most open community.
Yeah. Progressive.
So very
Yeah.
progressive. And but the other thing I realized is the Jewish community and the Black community have a really strong connection because of the similar discrimination that they faced. And so a lot of the civil
Well-
rights was funded by the Jewish community.
Right. And usually what would happen is the Blacks would move into the Jewish ghettos after the
Right,
Jews
right.
would pull themselves out of those locations.
Yeah.
But there's always been that close relationship as far as Jews and Blacks.
Yeah.
and-
I
and
wasn't aware of that
go-
until recently.
And if you go further back, when you're looking at the 1500s, 1600s, things of that nature, the Irish were brought in as far as serfs.
Yeah. Yep.
with
Yep.
blacks. So the
Yep,
free
yep.
blacks that were in America early on, they came out of that serfdom type of environment, and it was
Yep.
the same with the Irish. So my great grandfather is Samuel McKee, and he came over from County Down, Dublin, Ireland, with the potato famine in the 1850s. And so the Irish and the Black, they talk about Black Irishmen, but
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
I'm one of those Black Irishmen.
You're one of the Black Irishmen.
So
Wow.
Bob, I'll give you another little history tidbit there. If you ever wonder why there's such animosity between Britain and Ireland,
Yeah.
and in the 1840s, the British were able to prove that the Irish were white Africans.
Oh.
That's how they looked at those Irish
Yeah.
people.
Oh, yeah. That's why they
So they
treated
were
them
white
the way they
Africans.
did.
So when they came over here, poverty
Oh.
unites.
Yeah.
And so when you look at a lineage, a lot of them will, like Ken's is a good example.
Yeah.
We'll go back to those McKees, which that was in Steubenville, right, Ken?
Yeah, McKees are out of in Steubenville.
Yeah.
right.
So I have some Steubenville McKee relatives. I haven't really researched them, but I know my aunt used to call them cousins. But anyhow, or my grandmother called them cousins. But so that was a common either out of the Scottish Highlands or or the Irish. It
Mhm.
was not uncommon for them to marry blacks.
Right. Well, my great grandfather Samuel Ramsey was married to a Henderson who was from Ireland. That in Jefferson County.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was a black man and a white woman,
Right.
and the McKee was a white man and a black woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's how up north, the
no,
difference is
Samuel McKee was actually, it was his daughter that was married to William Ramsey.
okay. So his
Okay,
daughter
okay.
was a
And
Henderson.
because his wife was a Brannigan,
Okay.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
was Wilsons and Brannigans that that came over, and she was a Brannigan. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so
And there's
that
Baileys.
that is not an uncommon story. The difference between the North and the South is this was a union of choice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where in the
right.
South, these were not unions of choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, you'll be, and when I was reading about Cyrus Jackson, I got to make sure I have this right, Ken. He was the guy I was trying to tell you that was the money lender, this guy that bought his own freedom. I can't remember
well,
his name. Finally remember
yeah,
Cyrus
yeah.
Jackson.
Okay.
Man, if I could remember it, I'm going to try to get this right. His son's wife father was Thomas Jefferson's oldest son.
What?
Was
Oh
Sally
my
Hemings.
gosh.
So we do
Get
have some
out.
of that Hennings blood in Harco.
No
You're
kidding.
No, in the Jackson. I read that last night and I made a note because I thought, oh, that's cool. But
That's
I
cool.
didn't actually, right, didn't
Was there
actually
a
write it
Harry?
down.
Was there a Harry Jackson? Because the Harry Jackson, all of the Wilsons in town,
Yep.
and the existing Jacksons are all part of, and some of the Wilsons. You remember Tina and Kelly and
Yep,
those guys?
yep, sure, sure.
And they were real fair with red hair, blue eyes, you know.
Yep.
They're probably offspring of this Cyrus Jackson, meaning, you know, the grandfather was
Well,
Harry.
yeah, not Cyrus. They would be offsprings of Cyrus's son and
Yeah,
his wife.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Or
Okay,
Cyrus's
alright.
daughter and his and
There'd
her
be gen-
husband.
Yeah, there would be
But
some.
yeah,
genetic-
that's probably a true. So anyhow, oh wait a
Oh,
minute, I got the wrong name on that, Ken. Wrong
you gotta
name.
go with that.
It is a Harrisville name. I'll text it to you when I get home. But their family in the mid 2000s actually went to the Jefferson family reunion.
No
Really?
kidding.
Yeah, I can get you that family name, but it does tie into the Jacksons.
It
Yeah,
wasn't
it does tie
Doubt.
into the Jacksons, but I can't. The name's slipping my mind right now. It's not Jackson.
Was it
but it's-
Doubt? Was it Doubt? Doubt? Doubt?
No, I don't ask me because I don't remember. But I'll
Okay.
text it to you when I get home.
Okay, you know what I just ran down? And I'm trying to figure out whether the guy was related because my great grandmother, she's buried out there in Harrisville. And she was married to, it's another set of Masons out of Loudoun County, Virginia. But her first husband died and she married an Allen, a Henry Allen. And I found, doing some research when you got me off on this thing looking, that there was a William Allen who they show as colored, who was preaching with the Quakers at one of the meeting places in Freeport, Ohio,
Oh,
in early 1800s.
yeah.
You know,
That doesn't surprise me because those Freeport Quakers, the Mount Pleasant Quakers, the vast majority of those came out of the South.
right?
You know,
Yeah.
they got rid of their slaves. I forget 1806, 1808.
Right. Well,
And
that's
they moved north. And now we got to be realistic because a lot of them sold their slaves.
right.
And
Yeah,
then
they
left.
did.
So they
Yeah.
didn't own them, but they didn't necessarily set them free either. So
Wow.
we're
Wow.
at 20
All right.
after. Ken, I'll send you this. I'll send
Okay.
you.
Excellent.
Good seeing you. How you doing, Doc Barker?
Ken-
There in retirement.
Doing fine.
Good. Good.
Thank
Good for
you.
Hey, how
See you,
you
Ashley.
doing?
See you, Gary. See you, Kenny. Gotta go.
Okay,
Great
take
job,
care.
All right,
guys.
we'll see you guys.
Thank you. We'll
I'll
do it again.
send
I'm
you
looking
some
forward
stuff
to it.
tonight, Ken. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Send me this presentation.
What's
Sorry,
that?
I missed it. I said,
That's
send me
all
the
right.
presentation.
Well, you can read the slides just as
It
good as you
is-
can listen
it's
to me, or you can
recording.
listen to it tomorrow, right, Sandy?
Yeah, yep, it's recording.
Oh, it is? Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Good.
All right.
Take care.
We'll talk to you
Thanks.
guys later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Well, let's end.
Leave meeting.